Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a ton to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform. So remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's get right into today's episode, starting off with the biggest news of the day, hands down. Jalen Suggs was a featured guest on the Six Man Show. Shout out to those guys, some of the best guys in terms of covering the Orlando Magic we have here on YouTube. And Jalen Suggs shared some upbeat news, but with a little hint of worrisomeness, or I guess you could say, or a hint of concern, I guess, if you're an Orlando Magic fan. Instead of just hinting to it, I'll just read it out to you. He went on the podcast and said, "I'm feeling really good. The knee has been a process. I've loved the growth. I've loved all that this summer has had in store for me. This is definitely the hardest summer that I've had so far. I've had injuries and experienced the rehab process on my own, in my own right. But I don't know. This has been a little different. Just every day and hammering away at it, but I'm feeling good. I'm feeling healthy, feeling strong. The rest of my body feels amazing. I really have gotten the time to work on all of it. I think this is my best upper body. This is the best my upper body has felt in terms of the look and the functional strength. So it's been great camp. It's been great. Camp and the return will come in time, in God's time, but our process is really working, and I love the spot that we're in." That last sentence is the one that's the most important. Camp, particularly, right? And the return will come in time. Meaning there's a likelihood that Jalen Suggs will end up entering training camp later on this week. Not fully 100%. May not participate. May participate in limited in a limited capacity. This is not the greatest, but it's an understanding that we have to have as a people that follow the Orlando Magic, that these type of injuries take time, right? And particularly for a guy who was only able to play a handful of games last season, and a guy who only played, I believe, 7 games with Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner last season in particular, because of how ravaged they were in the beginning of the year with injuries. This is something that you want to see Jalen Suggs take his time with. We need Jalen Suggs for the postseason. And most times with the Orlando Magic, you want to preface just jumping all the way to April and May, right? You usually want to take your time with those things. But in a season like this, the Orlando Magic are projected towards the playoffs. They're projected towards being a high seed in the regular season and being a team that's really considered as a real contender out of the East in the postseason. So this is about Jalen Suggs being able to make it to the playoffs. Yes, you're a youthful team, but these are the type of things you have to take into consideration when you're this caliber of a squad now. So if you have to slowly revamp Jalen Suggs, even with the rehab process that he had over the back half of last year into this summer, and even bleeding into training camp, you do that. This is what you get Desmond Bane for. This is what you get Tyus Jones for. This is what you draft Jace Richardson for. It's situations like these where you may have to stave off the rehab process of a guy in Jalen Suggs who has dealt with significant injuries dating back even to his times in high school in Minnehaha. Definitely had his fair share of little small knick-knack injuries back in Gonzaga, and has had his fair share of little things here and there affect him, including last season being the most impactful in his tenure with the Orlando Magic. That's why you do what you do in the offseason at the guard position, to stave off some of these circumstances so that you allow a guy like Jalen Suggs to get healthy. Because we know this is a guy that finished, when he was healthy 2 seasons ago, he finished 10th in voting for DPOY. When he was healthy 2 years ago, he was voted as one of the top 10 defenders in the NBA. He was listed to All-NBA defensive second team. That's Jalen Suggs healthy. That is what a healthy Jalen Suggs looked like. So you have to preface everything that he said with a grain of salt of, it's good to know that the rehab process is going well. It's good to see that things are progressing in a way that, although it may have been difficult in a process in terms of getting himself back to even where he is now, he's going to be better for it. And him wanting to be on his own, like somewhat timeline in terms of coming back full strength, you allow that. Because if you want this team to reach the caliber that all the projections say they are capable of getting to, that starts with Jalen Suggs' ability to be on the floor healthy and be on this team as the all NBA caliber defender at the point guard position that we know he is. So it's one of those things that, although the news doesn't sound great, I think the way that Suggs is handling it, and hopefully the way the Orlando Magic in tandem choose to handle it, will all benefit what the Orlando Magic are trying to build towards this season, which is to be a team that's discussed in the Eastern Conference Finals, a team that's discussed as a real contender to come out of the Eastern Conference this year, right? That's what you want all of this to work towards. But don't take my word for it. ESPN believes that a healthy version of Jalen Suggs is a player that is due for quite the leap. How much of a leap, you ask? Last year, in the ESPN's top 100 players rankings, Jalen Suggs was 95th. This season, ESPN, with a little bit of projection, ranked Jalen Suggs at 59. Yes, a 44 spot jump. Let me read what they said. Like the Magic, Suggs is looking to bounce back from an injury-marred season. The tough point guard sat out all but one game after January 3rd because of injuries. He would later require season-ending surgery on his left knee. A healthy Suggs is a huge key to the Magic's success with his defense and competitive leadership. He averaged a career-high 16.2 points, 4 rebounds, and 35 starts. If Orlando is going to realize its full playoff potential, it will need a healthy Suggs. Finishes off to say last season the Magic went 20-15 with Suggs and 21-26 without him. Suggs, Paulo Banchero, and Franz Wagner played together in only 6 games last season. So, in retrospect, this team is a -5 record-wise with Jalen Suggs off the floor and a +5 with him on the floor. Goes to tell you that his defense and leadership alone is very valuable to the success of this team. Obviously, that's understood given the fact that he's one of the 4 to 5 best players on the team. But more particularly, with what he was able to do 2 seasons ago when healthy, and then building upon that at the beginning of last season before going down with injury, this is a guy who's slowly but surely growing his offensive game, and he's already a dude that had elite defensive chops. I think for anybody who's watched the game long enough, Jalen Suggs is slowly but surely rounding into becoming the torchbearer, the next torchbearer behind Drew Holiday is like one of the most underrated point guards that, like, you just know you don't want guarding you, and you know that you have to respect when you're guarding him. That's where Jalen Suggs is. Is Jalen Suggs as elite of a ball handler as Drew Holiday was at the peak of his powers? No. As a ball handler and decision maker, Drew Holiday is still cream of the crop. When you look back at it, the peak of powers version of him, or at least let's look back as far as a few seasons ago with the Milwaukee Bucks. I think what you would say was the most well-rounded version of Drew Holiday. I don't know if Jalen Suggs is there yet, but the three-point shooting is ahead of schedule. The defense has translated superbly. The athleticism has allowed him to be dangerous as an offensive threat slashing-wise. The decision-making is coming along. He just has to fill a role. I said this last podcast. This is a guy that if he comes in and he averages 15, 16 points, 5, 6 rebounds, and shoots 40% from beyond the arc as an elite level defender, That's perfect for what this team has to be this year. It's perfect for what this team is capable of becoming this year. ESPN sees a 44 spot jump in Jalen Suggs with the caveat of if healthy. So that statement by Jalen Suggs prior in terms of his timetable is very glaring because when he comes back, what will he look like? And if he comes back in the same framework as he was prior to the injury, let's say even 80% of that, according to ESPN, that's a top 50 player. According to ESPN, that is a borderline top 50 player. That is a guy, let's say top 60. Of course, it was 59. So let's say borderline top 60 player in the NBA. That is a really strong situation for this team because they've got 2 top 30 players in the NBA. One has the capability to jump into the top 15 this year, I believe. The other one has the possibility to jump into the top 25. Desmond Bane, I think, is really a top 30, top 35 player. They placed him closer to like 46, I believe. Then you have Jalen Suggs at 59. If 4 of your starters are the top 60, that's a big deal. Now, obviously, Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner need to be higher up on that list for them to truly vault themselves into the kind of conversation where we're talking about this Orlando Magic team is like the team to beat in the East. But Jalen Suggs, I said it last podcast, and I kind of been reiterating it throughout the beginning of this pod. Jalen Suggs is so important to this team from an anchoring perspective. It's like him and Mo Wagner are the 2 like energy guys, but Jalen is the one who provides it in a way that's like the most impactful because he's taking the opposing team's best perimeter shot creator. And across the league, that point guard position, these guys are killers as offensive shot creators at that spot. And Jalen Suggs is on a night-to-night basis taking the toughest assignment defensively. And he's been successful in being both a help defender, an on-ball lockdown defender, a guy who I think is one of the few perimeter players you can really build a defensive infrastructure around. Him, Dyson Daniels, probably maybe like a Amin Thompson for the Houston Rockets. Those are the only guys that you can build like a defensive infrastructure based on, similar to like how the Utah Jazz and the Minnesota Timberwolves do with Rudy Gobert, but now with a perimeter player. There's only a handful of guys that you could say that about, and Jalen Suggs is definitely one of them. Let's move on to the next topic, being one that I think is a little lighthearted, but it's going to be one for our true Floridian people to have to make a tough decision. An hour apart from one another, the first Orlando Magic preseason game at 7 o'clock against the Miami Heat is taking place. And at 8 o'clock, the Florida Gators with DJ Lagway will be taking on the University of Miami with Carson Beck at quarterback in a matchup, in-state matchup, where the Miami Hurricanes have been moving upwards. This team looks like a top 5 team in the country in college football for those who don't pay attention to it. If you're locked in on college football, you know what I'm talking about. This team has looked special through the first handful of games, and Carson Beck is looking like a Heisman candidate. DJ Lagway and the Florida Gators, on the other hand, they are trying to kind of catch their footing after what's been a relatively slow start for them in the early stages of this season. And before they start to step into SEC play, they're going to have to see this Hurricanes team first that has been quite the team through the first 4 weeks of the college football season. So for my true, full engaged Florida fans, right? Miami, both the Heat and the Hurricanes, and The Florida Gators and the Orlando Magic all playing together, essentially, in rivalry matchups on the same night. The question is, what game are you tuning into the most? I'm sure you'll have the flip back and forth channel situation set up so that you got to bounce back and forth between commercials. But if you had only one of those games you could pick where you could really lock in and watch every single snap, every single dribble, you want to see Desmond Bain in an Orlando Magic jersey for the first time? Or do you want to see Carson Beck versus DJ Lagway in a battle of two highly, highly rated quarterbacks coming into the 2025 college football season? Interested to hear what you guys say in the comment section down below. We're a couple of days, a couple of days at this point away from all of this kicking off. Really about a week and some change, actually. Nonetheless, two really interesting games. Obviously, preseason, you can only put so much weight behind it, but I'm sure a lot of Orlando Magic fans are excited to not only see basketball back, but particularly seeing Desmond Bain slowly integrated into this offense next to Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner. On the other end, Miami is really good this year. And this type of rivalry game could be one where it could be one for the books. It could be a statement game for a Florida Gators team that's trying to get back on track by taking down the top 5 team in the country. And for the Hurricanes, they could steamroll one of their biggest ops, obviously in their college football lifetime. So you guys let me know which one you guys will be tuning into the most. Obviously, I'm sure you'll be trying to watch both as much as humanly possible. But if you can only lock into one, catch every dribble or catch every pass, every run, which one are you locking into the most? Interested to hear what you guys say about that. Last but not least, let's talk about Bomani Jones. Bomani Jones on the Right Time with Bomani Jones podcast. Shout out to him. Actually, I'm a very big fan of his podcast. Has something interesting to say in relation to the Desmond Bain trade and the impact or lack thereof on where the Orlando Magic should be viewed this upcoming season. More particularly, the question was whether or not Desmond Bain was enough to truly help vault this team into like the championship contender conversation, the one that a lot of people are starting to slowly but surely gravitate towards. And Bomani Jones is not moved. He believes that Desmond Bain is not enough to get them over the hump, but the reasoning is something that's very interesting and maybe a slight jab at someone like Paulo Banchero. He says, in this era of NBA parity, I do not think you can make assumptions of how good you are going to be for how long that you might think. Especially it's a team that doesn't have a frontline superstar. Without the presence of a frontline superstar, I don't understand what they are doing. Now, shout out to our friends over at Orlando Magic Daily. They kind of double down on this a little bit further on and say, still, doubts and questions surround Banchero. His critics will say that he is still too inefficient as a shooter and that the numbers say the Magic are better when he's off the floor. There are truths to those. The added context shows Banchero took several meaningful steps last year. After struggling for a month after injury, he was very efficient, averaging 29 points per game on 58% true shooting from the field, or 58% true shooting, in 24 games he played after the All-Star break. Later on, they go off to finish by saying, the Orlando Magic traded Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony, and four future first-round picks for Desmond Bain. It was a huge gamble on a singular player to help elevate them. Taking this alongside the max contract that Magic gave Franz Wagner last summer at the max extension, likely to become a super max extension to Paulo Banchero, it states how invested this team is in its core. This was a now or never summer. Couple things to unpack there. We're going to do it very quickly, though. Number one, Paulo Banchero is a frontline superstar. You'll see this season. I've said it a million times on this podcast, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole rant again. You can check out past episodes. Any of them that have Paulo Banchero as part of the thumbnail, I probably went on an absolute spree about how much I believe this guy is going to take the leap into the next level. I believe there is a Anthony Edwards-esque leap from like that guy that's around like the 15th best player in the league to like discussing as like a top 7 player in the NBA right now kind of conversation. I believe that Paulo Banchero is going to take a jump from being like a mid-20s guy where a lot of people are ranking him to like the conversation of like cracking the top 15 very calmly, right? So Paulo Banchero is a frontline superstar. Number 2, Desmond Bane is there's a lot riding on Desmond Bane coming out and producing, particularly on the offensive end. That's been understood. If Desmond Bane does that, with the infrastructure this team already has, he is a needle mover because their biggest issue is offensive efficiency. They've been a bottom 10 offense for the last 3 to 4 seasons in particular, and obviously have not been a top 10 offense in nearly 2 decades, right? As we've touched on this podcast a ton. If Desmond Bane, for Bomani Jones, who says he doesn't understand what the Orlando Magic are doing, if Desmond Bane helps this Orlando Magic team rise to a top 15 or better offense while this team maintains its top 5 or at bare minimum slips down to still being within the top 10 offensively this year, that is a win for the trade. Because this is a team that has not accomplished that in the Paulo Banchero era. This is a team that hasn't accomplished being a top 10 offense since the Dwight Howard era ended. You pair that with the fact that they would be a top 10 defense, and now you have the formula for what many say is how you build a championship team. All-star caliber / MVP level all-star, Paulo Banchero. High-level all-star wingman to follow up as a secondary shot creator, Franz Wagner. Tertiary stars / star in their role guys who could thrive in a real way and produce with what they are asked to do. Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bane, Tyus Jones, Wendell Carter, Anthony Black. These are the guys that can be stars in their role, right? And a developmental coach in Jamal Mosley who, although the X's and O's are a little questionable, the man knows how to coach defense. So if this team can take a step just talent-wise, internal talent-wise, and player development with guys like Shamgar coming in, the guy already knows how to coach defense, talking about Mosley. If this team, from an internal development standpoint, can grow into a top 15 or better offense, paired with the coaching acumen defensively of someone like Jamal Mosley, this team is going to be lethal. So I can understand the fear behind what the gamble means if Desmond Bane does not successfully elevate this team in that way. That's the gamble you take. But if he does, this team is, arguably like the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. Arguably. Now again, the New York Knicks have a lot to say with that. They had a great offseason. Bringing in Jordan Clarkson, Malcolm Brogdon, Gershon Yabusele. That's huge for them. The Cleveland Cavaliers maintain their roster as is. Don't trade anybody despite all the rumors around Jared Allen and Darius Garland. And you bring in Lonzo Ball as your perimeter defender that can shoot 37+% from beyond the arc when healthy. Something that you weren't getting from Isaac Okoro. Those two teams are solid. Elite even. But with the infrastructure built for the Orlando Magic, if Desmond Bane is able to fulfill what they traded him for, the Orlando Magic are right there in that conversation firmly with those two teams as the teams that need to be discussed the most when we're talking about coming out of the Eastern Conference. But with that being said, the question of the day for you guys is, do you believe that the Magic don't have their frontline superstar? That being that you don't necessarily know whether or not Paulo Banchero is that top 10 caliber player that maybe I think he is, that top 10, top 15 caliber player that maybe I think he is? Or do you think Bomani Jones has lost his mind and Paulo Banchero is poised for the kind of season that's going to prove him wrong and put himself into that conversation where we're talking about him as one of the five, one of the top five under 25 players in the league, one of those guys in the top 15 conversation, and a guy that we're going to be really having to discuss in the All NBA conversation this upcoming year. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section down below. But with that being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. I will see you guys again tomorrow with some more news. But until then, peace.